Be curious, not judgmental. This is a phrase we've discussed on the podcast before, and it was recently popularized on the show Ted Lasso. The thing is, curiosity is not a behavior. It's not just asking questions. Curiosity is a mindset. And to be truly curious, we have to see people as people. When it comes to our players, we have to recognize their humanity. We have to focus on their needs, their challenges, and objectives. When we truly seek to understand their story, their life, their perspective, everything they've gone through, when we don't just put ourselves in their shoes, we put ourselves in their feet, their experiences, then the right questions will come to us. And most importantly, athletes will not feel judged, but they will feel that we are genuinely interested in them as a person. And this is something that's so important that Dr. Tim Elmore shared around Generation Z. And our athletes now more than ever want us to care about them as people. Now, this concept is where we will continue our conversation with Chip Huth, who we spoke with in our last episode. And we were talking about self-deception and an outward mindset. If you haven't listened, be sure to check it out. Chip is a former Kansas City Police Department officer and now is a leadership consultant with the Arbinger Institute, a fascinating guy, deeply genuine, and some incredible stories. Welcome to the Coaching Culture Podcast. I'm your host, JP Nurbin, and I'm joined by my friend and co-host, Nate Sanderson. The mission of this podcast is to help you become a better leader and build a better culture. In addition to this podcast, I'm the founder of TOC, which provides one-on-one coaching and consulting for leaders. Learn more about us at tocculture.com. This episode is brought to you by my latest book, The Culture System, a proven process for creating an extraordinary team culture. It's been endorsed by many exceptional leaders and coaches, one of those being 2022 NBA Coach of the Year, Monty Williams, who called it a special book with inspiring stories, applicable strategies, and a proven model for developing team culture. This book is more than just a collection of practical tools for leaders. It teaches a proven framework that some of the world's best organizations and teams use. It's packed with real-life examples and case studies that show you how these ideas can be implemented in any context. Whether you're a coach, manager, or leader, you'll find invaluable insights to help you build the culture you want. Don't miss out on this opportunity to transform your team. Visit myculturesystem.com to learn more about the book, or you can get your copy on Amazon or Audible today.
And some of the vocabulary that I've really identified with from Arbinger is, seeing people as people versus seeing people as obstacles to whatever my goals and objectives are. I remember a story a couple of years ago when I was an assistant coach and we had a kid that her effort level was down in practice. And so all of a sudden, we can't run as fast and we're not getting back on defense. And she's an obstacle to us being successful on the court. And, we would have addressed that in one particular way, but I think JP and I were in the middle of this conversation at this point. And so I thought about asking some questions first. So I pulled this girl aside after practice and I just said, "Hey, I noticed you weren't yourself today in practice." And anyway, the long story short, my questions about trying to understand her more as a person led to this place of her frustration because her dad was pressuring her at home to score more, but she knew that wasn't her role, right? And so that manifested in her lack of effort in transition. That obviously was the key that unlocked everything, both in the relationship and in being able to empower her to, one, have someone to help walk through that with her, but her to be able to embrace that role and move forward and build that relationship with her. Are there examples that come to mind quickly for you, as that transition was happening from seeing people as obstacles to those goals that you had with your team and starting to see them as people?
Yeah, but first of all, I'm so captivated by the story you just told, Nate. I want your permission to use that story with attribution as such a powerful example of just being able to diagnose the root issue. I think when I'm in the box, as we say, when I'm inward, I'm walled off from the reality of other people. I'm not interested in the deeper truths. I'm not interested in what's actually happening and diagnosing things properly as you did. I'm just interested in getting quick results. And it's just that is so powerful of a story. I mean, thank you for sharing that. The patience, that exemplifies the best of what it is to be a coach. You're not measuring people against their performance. Maybe they're half stepping in practice. They're phoning it in. You're measuring them against their potential. What is this person actually capable of? Which you cannot know until you get close enough to actually see them. And you get curious enough to actually try to find out what's happening with them beneath the behavior, beneath how their attitude is manifesting. I'm sorry if I seem a little excited about this, but I don't know if you fully appreciate the power of that story you just told. Not only the power to help us as coaches more generally understand the need for us to be curious, be outward, as we say, but also just the power that it has as an example for me for the times that I'm in a rush and I fail to realize that fast is actually slow with people. And slow is actually fast with people. It's a pay now, pay later proposition. I can pay now up front by building that relationship, getting curious, trying to diagnose more deeply, or I can pay on the back end when the work I didn't do up front ends up hindering that athlete's ability to perform. I can't actually free them to make the most maximum contribution, the most meaningful contribution to the goal of winning the game, the goal of developing the character of the players, the goal of showing up and having the best performance that we can have individually and as a team. I can't do that. So anyway, I don't remember your question.
No, I appreciate you saying that, and certainly you're welcome to take that story and run with it. I was just curious if there were, if you can think of a situation in your own experience where, whether it's policing or anything else, where this new approach changed how you interacted with others or how your team approached a situation.
Yeah, big time. So many, especially the curiosity piece. I'll give you a story that I don't tell a lot when I talk to people. As a consequence of doing the type of work we did, we took down a lot of doors. And on the other side of a lot of those doors were really violent criminals who had done some really bad things. But a lot of times, there were also family members on the other side of the door. There were also people who they ranged from innocent to peripherally involved in the criminal activity. And there were pets. And our response, when we came across a dog that was in any way aggressive, was to simply terminate it. We would just simply kill the dog and move through that target. Our philosophy was the dog's a mere distraction to our efforts to focus on people. We don't have the time to contend with this. So let's think about this. We are making forced entry into other people's homes, shooting their pets, arresting their loved ones, and just tearing that house apart looking for evidence. That's like what our job consisted of. And we did that for years. And oftentimes, no surprise to either of you, people would be more upset about the fact that we killed their pet than the fact that they were going to jail. And we just always thought, well, that's a cost of doing business. So after we make this shift as a team, we start turning outward. And we start thinking about the implications of our work on all people involved. We're sitting around the team table, and I think it was Billy Von Wolf. Billy Von Wolf asked this question that we never would ask before. He said, if we could kick in your house, now he's talking to the team member, if we could kick in your house without killing your dog, would you want us to? And everybody in the team table was like, of course. Why? Well, our dogs are part of our family, right? And it just starts hitting us that, wait a minute, our approach this whole time has not been considering that dogs are part of people's family. That's true for like 80% of dog owners, I think. And so that then spurred curiosity and led to Billy Von Wolf ran point on this project. He brought in a dog expert that embedded with our team for 2 weeks, watched our behaviors, watched our objectives, got really curious, understood what we were trying to accomplish, watched how we interacted with search warrants, how we interacted with dogs. He just paid attention. And then he developed a curriculum for us to help better understand dog behavior. What's the difference between a tail wag and a body wag? Does tail wagging always mean that they're happy? How can we use physical barriers? Ways that we could control dogs using catch poles. We brought on what's called a Taser X3, which is a semi-automatic taser that could actually incapacitate dogs long enough for us to get them on a catch pole and extract them. We brought in fire extinguishers to distract the dogs. We could spray them with fire extinguishers to back them down. We added people to the trailer team to actually physically take control of dogs to get them off of the target objective, to move them off down to the street or by the vehicles to detain them there. Develop relationships with animal control. We started looking, as we were doing trash pulls and reconnaissance, we started looking for everything from the size of dog scat, which could let you know in the yard how big the dog was, to dog food bags that had been thrown away in the trash. We started planning for this, right? And I'll tell you what ended up happening as a result. Well, a lot of things relationally end up happening. I mean, you can only imagine, right? But what ended up happening that was actually measurable, quantifiable, was that in the first year that we adopted this program, we reduced the shooting of dogs on search warrant services by 90%. 90% less dogs being terminated on search warrant services, which it's hard to calculate what that means in terms of relational capital with the people that you're interfacing with. And that was just one example of how this change in the way we were seeing other people manifested into some really, really good results.
You go through this transformation, Chip, yourself, and then you bring it to your team. How did you bring it to your team? And then what was that effect overall over the next few years?
Wrongly. Is that an adverb? Wrongly? Yeah, at first I brought it to him wrongly. Like I came at it with like every other thing I'd ever learned, right? Okay, I just need to tell people what to do. And so I remember coming into him and pounding the table. We're going to be more respectful, as I'm yelling at him to be like, so think about how maniacal that is. You guys are experts in your field, right? You're laughing because you see right away, like, okay, Chip, so you're telling them to do something you're not doing. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Well, that's coaches all the time, though. Like coaches always, we lose our mind on the sidelines. I mean, how often does a coach say, you guys got to get it together. You're going, crazy out there, or, and then at the same time, we're literally have lost our minds. So they don't feel alone in that. We're coaches are just as guilty.
Oh, I really love that. Thank you. That does make me feel a little bit better about how awful I was. But anyway, you all know then from your experience what doesn't work. What ended up working was I had a former Marine sniper, Andy Kyle. He came in my office. He's assistant team leader at the time. He comes in my office, he closes the door, and he's going to have one of those coaching talks with me, right? You know how the coaches are when they throw their arm around you. And it's something done for you, not to you. And, and so he's going to come in and he's going to talk to me a little bit candidly. And he says, Chip, I think I know what you're trying to do here. And it makes sense. It really does, especially given the way that society is becoming more interconnected. He said, but instead of telling them what to do, how about you show them? And I said, well, what do you mean, Andy? He says, well, listen, he goes, I see the value in having this unconditional positive regard, as you call it, for people that we interact with out in the public and the other team members and the other federal partners and prosecutors and all these other people. He goes, but if these guys, and they were all guys at the time, are coming to work feeling objectified and put up on by you, how do you expect them then to take the attitude you're wanting them to have out into the community? And I thought a lot of things. But the main conclusion I came to was I'm not walking my talk, right? Like I'm literally telling them these things are important. Matter of fact, they're essential, but they're not important enough for me to actually operationalize myself. And it's like that. I want them to trust me, but I haven't made and kept any commitments to them. And so that was the big change. I just said, you know what? I'm not going to tell them anymore what to do. I'm simply going to show up with them in the way I want them to show up with other people. I'm going to realize they're people too. I'm going to invest in them. That manifested in performance growth management meetings that I never had before. All I ever did was evaluations. You know, at the end of the year, you get an eval post hoc. This is what you did wrong. This is what you did right. And this is where I scored you. And what questions do you have? Then I started doing performance growth management meetings where we're having ongoing meetings where they're reporting to me on their performance. And rather than trying to hold them accountable, I'm preparing, training, and equipping them to be accountable. And there's development there, and there's sacrifice on my part. Leaders miss this a lot. It's true, I think, in coaching too. This is a Chip Huth thing. You can feel free to disagree. But one of the ways I can tell actual leadership is happening is that there's sacrifice. If I'm not making a sacrifice, that's a red flag that I'm not leading. It could be my time. It could be my perspective. It could be maybe I have to exercise a little patience or get a little closer to the issue, get a little more curious. But if I'm not sacrificing something, then I'm really not leading, right? So those sacrifices started to happen, and then people were able to take the accountability baton and kind of run with it. And that was the thing that actually did it, was me living it out. You know, I remember this old adage, you know, you're always leading and sometimes you talk. And I think that's true. And I think it applies to coaching too, right? I mean, this idea that, you know, we're always coaching. Sometimes we talk. All eyes are on us. They're paying attention. Are we doing the things that we say are important? Are we actually living them out? Do those principles actually matter in our lives enough that we're living by them? Or are they just something we put up on a poster on a locker room wall, you know, to ostensibly motivate other people? You know, nobody knows, nobody cares what Emerson said. They don't know Emerson. They care what you're saying, and more importantly, they care what you're doing. And that was a lesson that I took away.
So you see this change, you know, and as I've listened to you tell the story in a couple of different places, I think one of the things that our coaches run into, so one of the patterns kind of that coaches that we work with sometimes come to this place of self-awareness, and they have this mindset shift of, I want to be more transformational, more purposeful, and more missional in what I'm doing as a basketball coach, hockey coach, volleyball coach, etc. And so they go back to their staff and they present this change of philosophy. And even if they do it in a way that you're describing, maybe with a little more humility on the first step, and then trying to walk it out, how does it become contagious? I mean, what for your team, it can't just be you that now sees people as people or has a bit more outward mindset. How does that then spread to others on your team?
Yeah, I found the best way that I know is actually to solicit coaches. So what I need is, I understand the principles, but I need someone there to be able to support me in operationalizing them, to offer me course corrections. Again, the power of a coach, in my estimation, isn't what they know, it's what they see. The perspective they bring to bear on what I'm doing, the perspective that I can't have because of my biases, fears, prejudices, and loyalties. So like what we did was we just ensured that we could learn from as many people as possible. We all became each other's coaches. We instituted what we called a buddy check system around these principles. So in the airborne divisions in the Army, generally when you jump out of a plane, you jump out on what's called a static line, which means that your equipment, your chute is hooked up to the same line as everybody else in the stack. If your equipment's messed up, you might not only mess up your jump, but the jump of everybody in the stack. But the problem is, because most of your equipment is on your back, you're blind to it. You can't see it. So if we're in the same stack together, getting ready to jump out of a plane, they do what's called a buddy check. You check my gear, and then I check yours. Well, I'm of the belief that we also have blind spots in our morality. Our biases, fears, prejudice, and loyalties, those things we've talked about, blind us to our reality and the impact we're having on other people because of our tendency to justify whatever approach we take. Other people can see those things. and I invite them in to offer me those buddy checks. So for our team, it was part of our lingo. If we saw another team member turning inward, we saw another team member, kind of reverting to that default way of objectifying other people, we'd step up and have the conversation. It became part of the culture that's what was rewarded, by the way, was people that had the courage, the moral fortitude to have those conversations. That was reinforced and rewarded. So when you sit down for your performance management meeting, I'm bringing that up. Hey, Nate, let's talk about last week. When you saw JP kind of losing it a little bit with that guy, getting a little frustrated, you stepped in and you tapped him out and you took over. That, my friend, is leadership. That, my friend, is what helps develop people's character. There's so much happening there in that one act of courage. All virtues at the point of testing become courage. I think C.S. Lewis said that, right? All virtues at the point of testing manifest as courage. And so I reinforce that in you, and that just becomes normative for the team. So I would recommend, to the extent that you can, get rid of the idea of individual integrity, personal integrity. Don't get rid of it, but subordinate it to this idea of collective integrity. I'm not only responsible for me discerning and acting for what is right, I'm responsible for every single member of the team doing that. None of us operate as individual. We're all part of this organism. We're two things. We're like a grove of aspen trees. We're a community and an organism. A grove of aspen trees, I think they call them a stand of trees. When you look at a stand of aspen trees, you experience them as a community of individual trees, but you go under the soil and you see they're all connected by one common root system. It's one big organism. The largest one, by the way, I think is in Utah. It's like the Pando stand. 106 acres, 106 acres, the largest organism on the planet. That's what we are as a team. We're not a single individual. We're an organism and a community of people striving for a goal, and an organism where whatever happens to one member impacts the others, so that we're all responsible for that single member. All of us are rallying around them. Think about what they're able to accomplish with that type of support system.
That was awesome. I think it ties back so much to, here you initially took that approach of just telling them and telling them what to do and telling them how to lead. But here, with the right mindset and demonstrating that, you do what we actually call, with a lot of our teams, player development plans. And player development plans or player improvement plans are when the coach sits down with the athlete. And it isn't like, oh, here's all the areas that we see you need to get better at, and here's where you're strong at, and here's how you're going to help the team. And the athletes just nod their head, yes. No, it's completely flipping that. And it's me asking them how they feel they're doing, what they bring to the team, what their strengths are, where they want to, improve upon, what's important to them. Back to that, finding out what are their needs, what are their challenges, what are their goals, their aspirations. And that's the player development plan, is working with them to coach them through that. And what you're talking about here is, I love this, is really encouraging peer coaching, right? This could, as a coach sees this, it's player coaching another player, right? Holding another player accountable, a staff member holding another staff member accountable. I think that you're coaching them on the support, and you're celebrating it when they do step up and hold each other accountable. And I think that's really, really powerful.
Yeah, look, those values that we talk about all the time, we bring them to life when we do that. They're not just words on a poster. At the end of the day, we measure, I think, effectively. We're most effective when we measure every decision we make, every conversation we have against our values. The hard work is deciding what we value, right? Get up front and understanding that, look, we need to align all of our behaviors, all of the ways that we communicate our intent with those values that we espouse as being ultimately important. So, yeah, I think it's huge. And the idea of, look, the more coaches I can get, the better. At the end of the day, I want to solicit everybody that's willing to give me feedback. I want to solicit all of them. And, a lot of times in my business, people will say, well, the only way you get better is through experience. It's certainly true that you learn to fight by fighting. You can read books on it, But at the end of the day, you know, if you're going to compete in judo or kickboxing or the UFC, you're really going to get good by actually doing it through the experience. But what we miss is it's not the experience that makes us good. It's evaluated experience. It's when you got a coach standing there alongside you that's actually critiquing and offering feedback and helping you learn based on their perspective and expertise. So it's not experience, it's the evaluated experience that actually makes us better, actually gets us where we need to be. And that just reinforces in my mind the power of what you do. And if I can solicit all of my peers to also be involved in that process, think about the advantage that I have. When I adopt the attitude that everybody I meet has something to teach me.
As we're kind of wrapping up here, we got a couple questions for you before we let you go. One of those, I was just curious, because if you could share, you'd be willing to share what the results were, because coaches are measured on results. People hearing this going, oh, this might sound great, Chip, but we got to win games. For you guys on the team, the SWAT team, you saw results. What were the results? What was the change, and what improvement did you see?
By the way, I would totally agree with those coaches. You absolutely need to get results. It's all about winning the game. It's all about that. We have to do that at the end of the day. This isn't just sitting around navel gazing. You know, this is really serious stuff. You have a job to do 100%. So the question is, how do we achieve that objective without adding on additional unnecessary friction? That's the question. How do we relieve that unnecessary friction? How do we mitigate or ameliorate that? So like with my team, most complained on team in the entire department. More lawsuits, more community complaints, more informal complaints than 3 inner city patrol divisions combined. We implement this way of working, and we end up not reducing the complaints, but eliminating the complaints over a 3-year period. We went 3 straight years with 0 complaints or lawsuits related to our work. So a 100% reduction in complaints and lawsuits in the first 3-year period. Now, before I actually, and even extending into 2 years after I left the team, that ended up being 8 years without a single complaint or lawsuit related to our work. That's a result. That's a savings of millions of dollars a year. Okay. We estimated it to be, just in complaints alone, about 35 million over 10 years. That in itself is pretty cool. But a lot of people that are a bit pessimistic by nature would say, well, that's easy. You just quit arresting people. You just start like a hug-a-thug program. You just become indulgent. Give people what they want. They quit complaining, right? That might be one way to think about it. That's not what we did. We got an award in the same 3-year period for tripling our seizures of guns, drugs, and illicit currency. So think about that. Tripling the result that we were trying to achieve, getting 3 times the result that we got before, while completely eliminating that unnecessary friction, those complaints and lawsuits. So again, I would echo what the coaches are concerned about, right? Yeah, if this doesn't help us achieve the mission, then it's just a philosophical exercise. But the truth is, beyond being theoretical and abstract, this is highly practical. This is like sanding with the grain in wood shop. You know, this is exactly what this is. This is much, much more than just theory. And we are not the only teams, as you can imagine, that have been able to leverage this philosophy, this way of being in the world, to maximum benefit.
I love that. And I think it leads me to my last question, be a really short one here for you, Chip, which is just off air. We were talking about, leadership as a practice, something that we have to work on, consistently, daily. If there was one leadership practice or discipline in your life that has helped to feed your growth, not just your growth, but just to continuously help you stay more and live more with an outward mindset than being inward, what is that leadership practice or discipline for you?
Well, as is typical with me, I'm going to give you twice what you asked for because I just can't resist. But I will tell you, for me, the most important one is to seek out problems. A lot of people, even leaders, spend a lot of time avoiding them. They even say things like, hey, don't cause me any paperwork, right? Or, hey, I don't want any trouble, right? And they're conflict averse. Conflict aversion is just cowardice wearing a politically correct hat. You know, what I'm really saying is that I don't care enough about this problem to wade into it. The opposite of courage isn't fear. Fear is an emotion that courage overcomes. The opposite of courage is indifference. I don't care enough to do the right thing, right? So I want to be intentional about seeking out problems. I want to be looking for them. I want to be leaning into them all the time. That is a practice. My radar is up. I am looking for problems because I want to move toward them. Charles Kettering, an author, has a quote I'm rather fond of, and I'll paraphrase it. Problems are the price of progress. Bring me nothing but trouble. Good news weakens me. And that quote says a ton about my philosophy in life. The only way to overcome the suffering inherent in problems is to voluntarily embrace them. That's how we transcend trouble, is to wade into it. Wade into it, right? So seeking out problems, lean into them. And the bonus one I'm going to give you, and people are going to think this one's a little bit, I don't know, Chip, journaling, just sitting down with a journal and just reflecting on what I'm thinking, just free writing. And I've got several journals depending on what I'm writing about, but I've got one at my home office on my desk that I just sit down and I just kind of reflect on where I slipped. You know, where did I not behave in line with what I say is important to me on a particular day? Inspirational things that happen, like with you gentlemen talking to you today, maybe lessons I take away. That process of memorializing those lessons is so beneficial when I go back and take another look. Because memory is so, look, don't rely on your memory. Memory changes, alters, you confabulate, you invent things from thin air, you adopt other people's experiences and incorporate them into your own. All of these things happen as a consequence of memory, because I think it's probably an evolutionary thing, right?
All right, huge thanks to Chip for coming on the podcast. So many good things I want to recap really quick. When we don't see people as people, we aren't truly curious. If you want to become more like Ted Lasso, it's not a change of a behavior. It's first a change in our mindset. The cost of doing business. Oh man, that story was so powerful. The story of how they would often just kill dogs just to get the job done. Chip and his team asked, if we could kick in your house with your dog without killing your dog, what would you want us to do? They asked themselves that question. And then they worked really hard to be better at trying to keep from killing the dogs. So often we think there is collateral damage in our job. We disregard the unhappy reserve player who's annoyed with their playing time, just saying, hey, that's part of the game. Or there's the player who struggles to handle the way we criticize them or coach them or are demanding. Ask ourselves, if you could coach and win games and not isolate or lose those team members, would you do it? Would you make the change? Another big thing we have to come back to is, how do we implement this change? How do we implement it with our players, with our staff? It starts with us showing them. We have to have a change in our mindset. We must make that shift ourselves and become the example. We have to become outward ourselves. And this is so impactful for our players and our coaches. Don't do what Chip did and just tell them to be more respectful or how to get outside the box or be more outward. Don't just tell them, show them. We first model the outward mindset with our players and our coaching staff. Love that quote. Actually wrote this down from Chip. You are always leading and sometimes you talk. You are always leading and sometimes you talk. And what do you do after you've become the example, the role model? Well, implementing change is most likely to occur in one-on-one conversations, coaching conversations with our staff and our athletes, right? Sitting down with them and working with them on it, coaching them through those changes. Lastly, I just have to mention that I love the suggestion for journaling. If you are a regular listener to this podcast, I've talked so much about how impactful it's been in my life, the power of journaling, as well as we've had so many other incredible guests share this powerful habit. It doesn't come natural for a lot of us, myself included, but the research shows it has many, many benefits. So I encourage you not just to check it out, but to commit to something like this, to some intentional reflection in your life, and commit to it. And it won't be easy at first. I guarantee you, it may not feel natural. It may not feel like it's your thing. But here's the thing. The research shows and the experience shows when we push past that discomfort, we do something uncomfortable, and we can adopt certain disciplines or habits in our life like that, it's a game changer. So I encourage you to commit to some sort of personal reflection like journaling. All right, that's it for today's episode. Thanks for listening in to the Coaching Culture Podcast. Be sure to subscribe, leave us a review, and share it with others who might find it valuable.